Now, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, we obviously have very ambitious EV targets, 1 million on the road by 2030. Currently, I think there's around 60,000 and about 15,000 of those were sold this year. So, I mean, the signs are good that things are happening. Jeremy, if I could come to you first, can you just tell us a bit about sort of the trends we saw in sales this year and what we're likely to see next year? And in particular, are we likely to see this long delays and waiting for EVs be reduced?
Well, there's a few elements to that question, I guess. I mean, the first part is, it's been great to see in 2022. If you look at the share of BEVs compared to the previous year, it's pretty much doubled. So that's been fantastic to see. It's been interesting. So if you look at the number of electric passenger vehicles on the Irish market, that's increased massively between 2022 and 2021. So I think you're really seeing customers responding to the level of choice there is in the market. I think over the years, if you'd asked a lot of people about when they were making the move to electric, quite often the objections you were hearing weren't to the concept of moving to electric. It was more a case of, but I need my car to be able to do this or this or this, as well as being electric. And as the number of models on the market increases, you're seeing more and more customers who are thinking, okay, now electric works for me because it can do what I need it to do for my family. So, it's fantastic. And, ourselves, we're probably expecting to see our electric passenger sales probably treble next year. As, we have the Zoe, we have the new Megane obviously launching right now, so it'll be on the market in January. And then towards the end of 2023, fingers crossed, we'll be getting one more string to our bow. So, that's the way we're seeing it moving, and fantastic. In terms of supply, there have been challenges due to the semiconductor situation. That hasn't gone away yet. It's definitely still a factor. I think we're working our way around it probably more efficiently than we were because we know what to expect. And I think at a central level, when it comes to manufacturing and planning and that kind of thing, we're seeing that they're getting much better at prioritizing markets in line with seasonality and that kind of thing. So, I think we'll be running on very tight stocks throughout next year probably, but I think we'll see a kind of strong response to the fact that Ireland has the January and July peaks, and I think we'll have to wait until the vehicles arrive, but I think we'll be in a strong position.
Generally, are we seeing an end in sight to it though? Because I think depending on who you speak to, they're sort of talking about the second half of next year as being the beginning of maybe the end of the chip shortage, or is that just pure optimism?
I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but
I don't think it's necessarily. I don't think it's necessarily just purely chip shortages. You've got to look at the demand for EVs that's existing. Everyone wants an EV now, and we're at the situation where it's more advantageous to drive an EV than it is to drive diesel. And I think that's really where a lot of the demand is driven, is that it's people actually have an economical advantage to actually driving, as well as kind of, the background and sustainability on it. So it's not necessarily just the chip shortage, it's actually demand led by consumers, really.
Absolutely. And Mark, if I could come to you just about the commercial market, are you seeing the same issues, long delays and waiting for vans, and the same shift towards electric vans, or is it happening a bit slower?
We've seen the adoption to electric a lot quicker in the car side of things. The commercial world is still a little bit unknown for people, and kind of some are tipping their toes in the water, and some of the challenges around that is just knowledge and awareness of what EVs can do for your job and your business. The supply chain was a slight challenge early in the year. Thankfully for us, the taps have turned on again. So we're looking at probably about 1,000 vehicles a month for production for us for electric, which is good. We have a number of new models coming on stream for EV. So electric for us is not on the agenda, is the agenda. and we'll have 4 new models coming on the next 18 months, which is exciting for us. The market itself, we're looking at the moment in the LCV world, like commercial vehicle world, only 1.74% is battery electric vehicles, which is extremely poor if we have to hit our target by 2030. So I think we need to have more government incentives, certainly to drive that forward for us.
Absolutely, yeah, big challenges there, and we will come back to government incentives in a minute. And Kieran, if I could just come to you, in terms of decarbonising transport, electric vehicles are obviously just one part of it, but there's also the whole life cycle of the car as well. And I was struck that Polestar actually planned by 2030 to produce a carbon neutral car. How does a car maker do that when they don't build cars from scratch? They depend on so many different suppliers.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I mean, it's our moonshot. I mean, we announced it earlier on this year. We don't know how we're going to do it, but what we've done to try and achieve it is we've went out to the market. We're looking to work with suppliers, new partners. We have 16 partners in place already. And what we're doing is we're going to bring all the technologies together to create this. So we have to look to change what we're doing in the automotive space, because people are a lot more conscious of what's happening now and what's happening in the future. We're partnered with a company called Circular, who track and trace everything we do. Everything we do to get that car built. So they said we don't have the solution yet. I mean, it is the moonshot, but I mean, the plan is to have it by 2030. I mean, from now until then, a huge amount can happen, a lot more developments. But that's the plan, that's the objective. I mean, for us as a tech startup that's building cars, essentially, we obviously have the support of Geely and Volvo, which is hugely advantageous for us. But Thomas Ingalats has set ourselves big tasks as a company, as employees. So that's why we're looking to develop and build this car for the future.
And to follow on from that point, Laura, do you think this is important to customers, or do they simply buy an electric car and think that's it, I did my bit for the environment now? Or is the life cycle, how that car was produced, the emissions that will cause, all of that, does that matter?
To one of the ladies from the organising event here today, and her dad was saying, oh, but where are the raw materials sourced from? And you know, people just have that conversation and they don't really believe that EVs can be actually more sustainable. I mean, we talk about the tailpipe emissions, and I think that's what we focused on mainly today. But the conversation has to move beyond just decarbonising. It has to move on to circular economy, to how the raw materials are extracted from the earth. What are we doing in our supply chains? If you take BMW, for example, at the moment, 30% of every car that we produce has got recycled materials. By 2030, we'll have 50% recycled materials. And we see the overall closed loop really being achievable by 2050. And you might say that that's quite a long time away, but we actually have so much to do to get to that position, because every time we move, we create CO2. So we have to remove that CO2 from every step of the supply chain, whether it's through our suppliers, the production, and then the use phase of our cars. And I think that, like, we're going to move on from this conversation about, it's an electric car, it's sustainable, I'm driving a sustainable car. But people want to actually look under the hood and see actually, well, where is the car's batteries, where's the lithium and all the materials being mined from? How is the company actually integrating sustainability throughout their company? How do they look after their employees? And what do they do on a social level? And all of these things are so more important than the fact that you're just driving an EV.
A question to all of you really then is, what role does the dealership have in all of this in terms of educating consumers, but also, I suppose, managing expectations at the moment about what EVs can do, how sustainable they are, the total cost of ownership, all of those things? Who would like to take that?
I think, well, it's an interesting question. I think, one of the things that's really important is one that you've hit on, which is the management of expectations. It's something that we've been training our dealer network on since the launch of Zoe, and we're in a very good position where we have very little staff turnover in our network. So people they learn, they interact with customers, they come back for the next session of learning. So I think in our network there's a really good understanding of how vehicles work, how electric vehicles work, they're really well able to coach customers through, managing expectations on range and that kind of thing, motorway journeys versus town driving and so on. I think my understanding from talking to sales executives is that while customers do ask questions about, say, social justice and sustainability in production, more of the questions tend to be about, say, the cleanliness of the grid and that kind of thing. So we're able to, reinforce the fact that not only is Ireland probably one of the cleaner grids in Europe with a really large volume of wind power, but that's improving year after year. So if you buy a car today that's electric, its emissions from power generation will actually reduce during the ownership period of the car. So, those things, they all form part of the sales training that we do, not just when each new model comes along, but when we're training sales executives on behavioural training as well.
And do you find when people come in, or do you hear back from the dealership that when people come in, they have researched this, or are they really do they come in not knowing these things, or do they come in fairly well versed in what they're buying? Or
I suppose
my own impression is that people who buy EVs know what they're buying. Those who don't just don't have a clue of them. They're just not on the horizon.
That's an interesting question, to which the answer today is probably very different from the answer 3 years ago. I think, certainly when we brought out the 40 kilowatt hour Zoe, and it was probably one of the first cars that was really capable of fulfilling the majority of people's needs. The people interested in buying that car certainly were really knowledgeable. They were in the market for an EV, they'd done research on EVs, and they came in knowing more than the sales executive knew. But the market for EVs has absolutely skyrocketed since then. And you really are much more in a position now where a customer is likely to have seen a car and think, that looks fantastic, maybe I'll buy that. And then they're much more likely to be relying on the sales exec for some of the information. I think I'll have to plug the McGann as a case in point. We're seeing customers coming into dealerships now, having seen photographs in the press, having seen test drives, and thought, I hadn't considered an EV before, but this looks amazing, so tell me about it.
That's interesting. Mark, that whole idea of managing customer expectations, is that a key thing when you're selling an electric van? Because obviously they don't have the range that passenger cars have. There's obviously huge considerations in terms of the load that you carry and all of those things. Surely there are really key things that have to be discussed.
The difference between, I suppose, commercial vehicles is someone's business, their livelihood. And if we're promoting a product or pushing a product, we have to make sure that what we tell the customer is actual facts on that matter. Where you see someone buying a passenger car, they may be asked a question about fuel efficiency, but they never ask the question how big the fuel tank is. Where commercial vehicles or any EVs, they say what's the range of the vehicle. I think the more important part of it is actually the speed of charge. It's how quickly can I get 80% into my electric vehicle within that period of 40 minutes, or in an ideal world back to 20 minutes. With commercial vehicles, for us and our dealer network, it's about education, knowing our customer, understanding what they need the vehicle to do. So we discussed the payload, their average daily mileage, is it fixed routes, multiple shifts on the vehicle, is the vehicle parked in overnight. So we go through all that at the start, and we identify, yes, an EV is suitable for your application. And the second part of the journey then is we discuss charging. Even though we don't sell chargers, we then discuss what type of charging the customer needs to get installed, whether it's an AC charger at 7.6 kilowatts, or whether they do require a DC charger, rapid charger, at 22 or 75 or 150 kilowatts. So we go through that part of the journey, and then the last step of the journey then is the infrastructure. So if we identify you do need to have a DC charger on site, do you have the grid or the capability from your electrical supplier to install a charger? So we do 3 simple steps with the customer through the whole journey, and it is a hand-holding exercise, certainly for commercial vehicles, because they're putting their faith in us as a manufacturer or a supplier to ensure that we're giving them the right product to suit their needs. And again, there's no point putting in an 88.5 kilowatt battery when a 51 kilowatt battery will do the same job. So we look at the balance between range and payload, and obviously then to tailor the financial package for the customer as well. But we've heard one thing here this evening or today is when an EV gives a problem or an issue, word flies around like wildfire. And what we've done is we've put in our own tailored Maxus Academy on our own site in Dublin, the Naas Road. So we look after the UK and right-hand drive Europe. So our knowledge with EVs is probably we have a good advantage against our competitors because we're 2 years or 3 years in the UK with electric vehicles, and we have tailored an academy to bring all our technicians up to the highest level of Master Tech for IMI Level 4. And what we fit on our EV vehicles then is we got a thing called Maxus Intelligence on Board, which is a full geotab system, telematics, that we can go in and monitor the vehicle's performance, we can see the charge cycles, the efficiency of the vehicle, the driver behaviour. But more important, when we're speaking to a new customer, we can show them the data to back up what we're saying, that their application is similar to, let's say, Tesco's, and that's what Tesco's are achieving out of their vehicles. So it's about being open with the customer, understand the requirements, and if an EV is suitable, it is. If it's not, do not try and sell an EV.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that really came across this afternoon with fleet electrification was you have to get it right the first time. And you can only do that if you analyse exactly what it is the customer needs or what it is you need from a fleet and matching the vehicle, to the right routes, to the right. It seems to be absolutely crucial. If you get that wrong, that's it. Do you want to come in there, yeah?
Question about rural versus urban. So we have lots of chargers in the cities, and we have, well, not lots, but we have enough, but the question is that when you live in Kerry or you live in Donegal, Mayo, absolutely, is there enough charging infrastructure around the retailers for the consumer to actually be able to confidently use charging stations if they need to as well? So, part of the whole process in looking at the consumer when they're actually looking to buy the car is, where do they live and what's the infrastructure around them, as well as kind of how much mileage that they're doing as well.
How realistic, though, are people when they come to buy an EV in terms of what they actually need? Now, I can understand, obviously, from a commercial point of view, it's very different, but your average driver does, I think the last CSO travel survey was 300 kilometres a week. And that's average, that's rural, urban, that's 7 days a week. So most people, given the range that's in most of the new EVs, will, they'll drive happily for a week without ever having to charge. But people still, I find people still ask me, but what about the trip I make to Kerry once a year? And you go, well, you wouldn't buy a 7-seater because you bring 7 people once a year. But people don't see that. They still think, I might need to do that. So, how do you manage that? Or it's the
once-a-month trip that you need to go down to Cork for work, and you can't actually do the whole trip in one go, that you need to actually plan out your route, and that halfway on the way back up in Cashel you can't actually get on the charging station because there's 3 other charge. So then you're looking at where else do I go looking at charging? So yes, I guess that you might look at the laws of average of how much people actually do, but unless consumers have confidence, they're not going to make the switch, and confidence is key, and being able to sell that right car to that person is 100% key to it. And it's one of the reasons why we've done so well in the market at the moment with our plug-in hybrids. 38% of that particular market, we have the market share on that, and that's why they work for people, because most daily commutes are under 50 kilometres, and we get that, but people still want to be able to drive wherever they want to drive, and at the moment we're still limited with that issue.
As a matter of interest with the plug-in hybrids, do you see many people coming back and then going in to a fully electric, having dipped their toe in the water and realised, it's nice to drive electric and it is possible, or do they trade up to another plug-in hybrid?
I think with the cost of diesel and petrol significantly increasing over the last 12 months, people are now actually making sure that they do plug in their car at night time and that they are using it when they can. If they do most of their mileage in Dublin, then they've got the confidence to move into a fully electric car. Maybe if they do longer trips, maybe they're not suited at the moment. Maybe they're not suited for another couple of years until the charging general infrastructure is where it's at. It's really how much mileage people do and what use they have for the car, where do they live, and are they using it every morning to drop the kids, or do they use it once a week at the weekends? It really is based about lifestyle and usage, and it's like, one thing doesn't suit everyone. One doesn't. So
And Kieran, if I can come to you, because you obviously you're a very new car company, you have a very different way of selling cars, different model, different everything. Are your customers are they more tech savvy than your average customers? Do they rely on the information on the website? How do they come to buy a Polestar?
Yeah, I mean, if we think of like in totality, I mean, the EV share in Ireland from 2019 was 2.9%. I mean, and right up this year is currently 15%. So EV share is going wherever we need it to be. But I mean, the customers, we're a direct-to-consumer brand, and so the cars can only be bought online. We opened our first space in Sandyford only 2 weeks ago. So what we found, the people coming in, they're not especially tech-savvy, and they obviously have done all the research online, but what they do when they come into our space, they're all non-commissioned sales staff, so we don't have sales executives, they're Polestar specialists. If a customer wants to have a conversation about the battery technology for 45 minutes or whatever it may be, that's what they do. They just guide and inform, and it's more of a listening and then responding to what the customer's needs. But our business model is very different. We don't have me and Jeremy just talking in advance of this, we don't have 33 dealers around the country where we can register 33 demos or double demos and we get the exposure. So the way we look to do things is an awful lot different. But the mix and the variance of the customer we've had in so far to buy the cars has been mixed from all ages. I mean, there's been young couples with kids who we've handed the cars over to couples who were in their 80s, and the couple in their 80s, they were so focused, to just come back to what Laura said, for them it was about sustainable transport, what they wanted, and it suited their needs. They sent us a lovely report, they bought the car, they spent 10 days touring around Brittany towing their caravan, and they said they had a diesel car in advance, but on any of the hills there was no issue with ICE cars. So and this is what we're feeling and what we're understanding from our customers, and it's great to see. And I think as Aoife said earlier on, the plan is about 40% mix by 2025, which is where we all want to go. And it isn't just sustainability, as Laura said, for the sake of it. There's a background to it, there's a meaning to it, and the customers are coming in asking the right questions, and the answers are there for them, which is great to see.
And Laura, if I could just come to you, another aspect in terms of people moving towards EV, obviously the environmental concern is the big thing, but it's also the running costs is a key thing. Now we have obviously, we see in the last year and a half, very high fuel prices, but we also see high electricity prices, and particularly for people who are depending on the public network rather than a home charger. How is that making it more difficult to kind of sell that total cost of ownership to consumers? Because I assume that gap is closing. I mean, we're still a good bit away from price parity, but at the same time, their EVs are not as cheap as they were to run.
Yeah, I know it's probably not a popular topic to mention because this is the EV summit and we're all got vested interests in driving people and consumers to driving electric. But we are coming to the stage, and it's just, it's an economic situation where it's out of our control that electricity prices have just gotten so high. And obviously it's still very much a lot cheaper to charge at home, but with the price of the public charging stations going up, and with the likes of Ionity being 73 cents per kilowatt, we've got to be very careful about the message that we actually send to customers if we're saying that key advantage of actually driving electric is the running costs, because we're getting to a situation where it might not be in the future where the running costs of diesel and petrol might end up being the same. It's more about what are the competitive advantages of having the car in terms of there's lower maintenance costs, it's quieter, it's a nicer driving experience, all those aspects that go above and beyond. But yes, it is definitely a consideration that with rising energy costs that we've got to be careful in what message we actually send to consumers. And obviously, like with zero tailpipe emissions, that EVs are 100% the way forward. It's the biggest area in terms of CO2 emissions the industry has. But we need to be able to guide customers in a way that we want them to adopt it for a longer term approach.
Because I assume it's a question that has been asked in dealerships. I mean, it was very clear cut before, they were much cheaper to run, but there is that issue now about as energy prices, you say, keep going up. Jeremy, could I just ask you, obviously then, if running costs aren't as cheap as they used to be, the grants are really, really key then still to getting people in the door. Do the grants, obviously they make consumers more likely to buy EVs, but do they make it in some ways your job almost harder because you're trying to plan in terms of buying for grants that you don't know will be in place by the time the cars come into the market? I mean, there's always that uncertainty around grants. So, I mean, would you like to see the government doing more, and would you like to see them maybe guaranteeing the grants for longer than the kind of short-termness that they kind of approach that they take at the moment with them?
Well, I mean, I suppose firstly, I'd love just to say I know that there are concerns about energy prices going up. Certainly the feedback that I'd see through our network is the majority of our customers are buying cars to charge at home on a driveway. And they're thinking maybe people who weren't looking at night rate electricity before are now looking at night rate. And I think for the vast majority of customers, there still really is a huge opportunity to save running costs by buying an electric vehicle. So, yeah, some of the public charging pricing has gone up quite significantly recently, but certainly home charging still remains really affordable compared to petrol or diesel. Moving on to grants, though, look, I think we have to appreciate the fact that in Budget 2023, the SCAI grant has been continued up until the end of June, and we have indications that some form of grant will continue after that, and hopefully we'll get more concrete information soon. Because, as you say, yeah, planning for vehicle supply in the face of slightly uncertain government supports is challenging. So, it's part of the conversation we're having each month in our production planning meetings. Certainly, we've had to highlight the fact that we don't know what supports we'll have before July, so we're really making sure that as much as possible we front load our production for 2023 into the first half of the year. But I'm confident that because we've been given effectively early clarity on the position for the first half of 2023, that we won't have to wait too long before we find out what's happening for the second half. Would I like to see a 5-year plan on what's going to happen with grants and VRT supports? Absolutely. It will make life so much easier for manufacturers, dealers and customers. It really would be great if we could have continuity and visibility there.
And Mark, you obviously feel that they should be doing more and feel more or less the same.
It's the easiest thing to say, yes, they should be doing more. What's welcome is that the new ZEVI is set up, the new task force, to concentrate on this transition to electric. And that's been welcome to see, launched earlier this year. They've introduced a large panel van grant, which is coming on stream, which is music to our ears, certainly, because previously, before, commercial vehicle was just lobbed into the car section and there was no other thoughts around it, and if it had got a higher RRSP, a retail price, there was no grant in the vehicle above 60,000. When you start speccing up an electric van and putting all the accessories, etc., onto it, it does creep above that. So they've now introduced a large panel van grant, which is good. It's welcoming. Happy days. As regards to fuel costs, you were saying earlier on, we looked at before the price increase of electricity was roughly 6 cents per mile for an EV versus 22 cents for running a nice engine in a van. But both prices have creeped up. So I know electricity is kind of gone up a little bit more than the diesel fuel, but it's still relatively a lot cheaper to run than it is on a diesel engine vehicle to run an EV, and it's total cost of ownership. For us, we've seen residual values increasing as well on EVs over the last 2 years, certainly, and stuff. So when people look at the whole life cost of an EV against the diesel, it's the gap is very, very narrow now and stuff. As regards the grants, we hope that the grants will stay in place for another couple of years to help that transition. We have a big target to meet by 2030, and without some subsidy from the government to help that transition, I think we're going to be on a very tough struggle. And another factor that they need to look at is, we know beforehand, the Irish people like to buy their own product, buy a car, buy a van, truck, whatever it is. In the new world of electric, and it's unknown to a lot of customers, they're looking now going down the leasing avenue.
Yeah.
And the challenges behind that is, unfortunately, under the minimis rule, of 200k over 3 years, that if you go to a leasing company and they've already hit that cap of 200 grand, they can't avail of a grant. And that's something that certainly needs to be looked at from the revenue side of things.
Okay, so there's lots more that can be done. I'm running out of time, but if I can just come to you very briefly, Kieran, are high energy prices impacting on questions that Polestar buyers have, or is it still working out that it's still cheaper, or are there other reasons why people are opting for EVs?
No, I think it's still working out cheaper. I mean, even this morning on the way down here, a litre of diesel was 205, as was alluded in the first conversation, and that's not, I can't see it slowing down. So yes, the increase for home charging is going up, but I mean, I charge at home, the costs are still absolutely negligible to if I was filling up once, twice a week. So people are aware of it, but I think it makes a lot more logical and economic sense.
Okay, thank you so much, Kieran, Mark, Jeremy and Laura, and I am over time, so thank you.